What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you have been having a wonderful weekend. It is Friday for me as I put this video together for you, but it is Sunday when we are releasing it. So I hope that Friday and Saturday were great. I hope that you've been hanging out here on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel throughout the weekend. We had a video that dropped on Friday where I took a look at how the Mavericks have reached the NBA Finals, which is great if you're a DFW sports fan, but just frustrating for the Cowboys given that the Mavs are back in the finals. The Rangers are reigning World Series champions. Who knows? Because I don't know right now at the moment I'm putting this together where the Stars stand in the Western Conference Finals against the Oilers. But either way, you get the point. And that was the point that I took a look at in our latest video. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe here to the YouTube channel. I talk about the Cowboys all the time around here. My name, once again, RJ Ochoa. If you want to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads, you can do so at RJ Ochoa. TikTok, RJ.Ochoa. RJ.Ochoa at SBNation.com is my email. And if you want to leave a comment down below, you can do that. Also, in that video on Friday, I teased something that I said I was going to be recording later on that day, which is today for me, Friday, which is a subject I find very interesting and very frustrating at the same time. What we're going to be looking at today is Joel Corey, who does a great job assessing the financial side of football, the contractual side of football at CBS Sports, and appears in a variety of places. He's hung out with us before here at Blogging the Boys. Joel is awesome. And I think we throw out the term hindsight is 2020 a lot, and it's obviously true. But sometimes that is just an expression and there isn't something measurable to it. And I appreciate that Joel went and measured the hindsight involved here. Joel took a look at what things could have been like for the Cowboys had they been proactive at every turn with Dak Prescott. Obviously, at the moment, Dak is still in contract negotiations with the Cowboys, and we have no idea what's going to happen. My assumption would be that a deal ultimately gets done, but it will probably be for an enormous amount of money. And I understand that we may disagree here. I think Dak Prescott is worth that. I think Dak Prescott should be the starting quarterback of this team. I think Dak Prescott is very, very, very good. And I'm totally fine if you disagree with that. I'm not here to try to change your mind. I've said that a lot lately. But something I've said every time I've said that I think is important is I'm talking to the people right now. I'm trying to talk to the people who do not believe in Dak Prescott. That's fine. You have every right to feel the way you want to feel. You have every right to have the opinion you want to have. If you don't believe he's great and you don't want the Cowboys to sign him, let's follow this flow chart here. If you're one of these people, but the Cowboys, if I told you that's great, but the Cowboys want to sign him, okay, you disagree with them. That's cool, right? Again, we can all disagree. Even if you're somebody who doesn't want them to sign him, if the Cowboys have determined that they're going to sign him, don't you then want it to be for the best deal possible? Don't you want it to be for the best terms possible that work for the sake of the team? I think that's fair, right? I think that's logical. If you do not want Dak, but the team does, then okay, fine. Get it done in the best way possible, which is where the idea of proactivity kind of comes in here. And that has always been the case. That has always been the argument with cornerstone franchise players in the NFL. If you want them around for the long haul, which it would seem, that the Cowboys do with Dak Prescott and with CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons, obviously, then being proactive, obviously, is the best way to go about it because, as we've said many different times, the price, the market, they only rise. So being proactive from the very, very, very beginning here, all the way back in 2019, would have saved the Dallas Cowboys a lot of money. And this is something that Joel took a look at. All right, let's look at Joel's article. You can read it at CBS Sports. Let me see if I can stop this video. There we go. All right, title, Agents Take, How Cowboys' Dak Prescott Contract Predicament Could Have Been Avoided. Look at that word right there. All right, so before we actually dive in, let me give you a little bit of a refresher here. Now, Dak Prescott was a fourth-round draft pick in 2016 per the NFL's collective bargaining agreement. He had a 4-year contract with the team. After 3 years of service in the NFL, you're eligible to discuss and come to terms on an extension with your club, which is why Micah Parsons is now in that place with the Cowboys. So that's 2016, 2017, 2018. In the 2019 offseason, so 5 years ago, the Cowboys could have gotten a deal done with Dak Prescott for the first time. And then it was very obvious that he was, going to get an extension with the team. I mean, this was before a lot of history, obviously, now that has maybe forced you away from Dak Prescott, whatever. I would imagine, based on my own memory of things, that in 2019, there was not this level of division relative to Dak among the fan base. So that being said, we saw at that moment in time the Los Angeles Rams were proactive with getting a Jared Goff deal done. The Philadelphia Eagles were proactive with getting a Carson Wentz deal done. And while you might sit here and say, well, yeah, those teams moved on from him, you might be one of those people, by the way, who, is like, oh, well, the Rams moved on from Jared Goff, so how great of a deal it was. That also says that Dak is not worth the money that Jared Goff is with the Detroit Lions. I find that to be hilarious myself, but we're not here to discuss that. Either way, the proactivity that the Rams and the Eagles showed with Goff and Wentz respectively is what allowed them the flexibility to move on from them when they did. When the Rams traded Goff to Detroit, when the Eagles moved on and traded Carson Wentz to Indianapolis. The fact that they got those deals done early is what gave them more flexibility than had they waited. That has always been the point here. So that being said, the Cowboys waited, and in 2019, they did not get a deal done with Dak. He went into the final year of his rookie contract. Jason Garrett also went into the final year of his contract with the team. It was not renewed after the 2019 season. In 2020, the Cowboys could not get anything done. They had to franchise tag Dak. He got hurt, obviously, that season. And guess what? Like we talked about, several times, talked about with Lindsey Rhodes here on the channel, he still got paid. Even though he shattered his ankle, he still got the richest contract in franchise history, which if you don't understand how valuable the quarterback position is, that kind of represents it, doesn't it? Either way, that was in 2021. Here we sit now because the Cowboys, even though they could have gotten an extension done with Dak Prescott a year ago and beaten the Jalen Hurts, the Lamar Jackson, the Justin Herbert, the Joe Burrow deals, they waited, and here they are again going into the final year of his current extension. And so that's why, as we've talked about forever, the price, the market have only risen. So that's the timeline that we lived in. But what is the alternate timeline, like the Remedial Chaos Theory episode of Community? Let's talk about what Joel wrote here. So conventional wisdom suggested the Dallas Cowboys will get a deal done with quarterback Dak Prescott earlier this offseason. Blah, 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 blah. Let's move down here. Extending Dak Prescott's rookie contract. The Cowboys would have needed to make Prescott the top signing priority. This is back in 2019, along with or instead of edge rusher DeMarcus Lawrence, who was given a franchise tag for a second straight year in 2019 when he was scheduled to make let's call it $2 million during the final year of his rookie contract. Here's the thing, by the way. Think about this for a second. The Cowboys had to tag DeMarcus Lawrence twice themselves or himself because they also butchered that deal. So the Cowboys were robbing Peter to pay Paul. They couldn't understand this overall philosophy with DeMarcus Lawrence, so they went through with him. And instead of prioritizing, look, I love DeMarcus Lawrence, and he's an important member of this team, and I'm glad the Cowboys got the deal done that they did with him. He remains an important part of this team, but Dak is the quarterback. He is the most important player on the team, and they prioritized anything else. And that they did prioritize anything else is crazy. That they also gave an extension to a running back later on in the 2019 lead up to the season at training camp and preseason. I mean, it's crazy. And they paid an off-ball linebacker. And Jalen, I mean, again, we could go on and on and on here, but the point here is this was the moment to get ahead of the curve in 2019. Even if you had waited until after the Jared Goff, after the Carson Wentz deals, at this moment in time in 2019, 5 years ago, it was about $30 million a year. That 35, ish that it was taking to get these quarterbacks done. And yes, the Cowboys would have had to come to one of those levels to get this deal done. But, that's the game. So anyway, let's move on to what Joel writes here. He talks about the Lions here. Heading into the 2019 offseason, Aaron Rodgers was the NFL's highest paid player at $33.5 million per year, blah, 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 blah. The $30 million per year barrier had been hit a couple of months earlier when Matt Ryan received a 5-year, $150 million extension with the Atlanta Falcons, blah, blah, blah. Kirk Cousins also got it. Let's look at this. Prescott ended the 2018 season on a high note. He took a major step forward over the second half of the season, which coincided with the Cowboys acquiring receiver Amari Cooper. Obviously, a lot has happened there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Only Tom Brady, who's now considered the greatest quarterback of all time, had more than Prescott's 32 regular season wins since he entered the NFL in 2016. This is at that time. This is 2016 through 2018, et cetera, et cetera. It probably would have required making Prescott the NFL's second highest paid player in order to get a deal done at the same time as Lawrence is talking about DeMarcus Lawrence here. The Cowboys would have also needed to concede a contract length with a 4-year extension. The continued insistence on a 5th new contract year was an impediment to a Prescott deal before he actually signed a long-term deal in 2021. If you remember the conversations that were happening at the time relative to Prescott and an extension, it was the length involved, the length of contract, 4 years versus 5 years. The Cowboys, in franchise tagging Dak, did ultimately get him for 5 years, if you want to look at it that way. So kudos to them. But they had to give him a fully guaranteed franchise tag year in 2020, and they costed themselves in terms of future money, which we're currently dealing with right now, because they didn't get this done ahead of time. Had they gotten a 4-year extension done in 2019, they would have been able to negotiate a new deal with Dak last year and saved a lot of money relative to where we're at now. We would not be talking about numbers like $60 million a year if they had been proactive dating all the way back to 2019. But Joel continues. Let's keep going on. A 4-year, $124 million extension, averaging $31 million per year, would have been in line with the average of the league's three highest paid players. Remember, this was 2019, and it took 2 more years for this to finally get done. And when it did, Dak got $40 million per year from the Cowboys. So if they had been proactive 2 years earlier, they could have saved, we're rounding and approximating here, $9 million per year from an annual average value standpoint. But they didn't. They delayed. They procrastinated, they waited, and they ultimately not only had to pay more in terms of annual average value, but they delayed the length of time in which they would get back at the table for a second extension, which is what we're currently dealing with in our real life moment. Prescott's contract security likely would have needed to be consistent with the average of just over $94 million in guarantees, blah, 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 blah. Prescott would have signed before Russell Wilson, who got that extension with Seattle at the time. This was before the Broncos trade and all that stuff. And so getting it done at that moment in time was critical for the Cowboys in terms of getting ahead of the curve, in terms of beating things, because this was also in a world prior to Patrick Mahomes' extension, which is very unique and very different. And obviously he's Patrick Mahomes, so he's one of one, so nothing and nobody can be compared to him. But that didn't happen until 2020, after the Chiefs obviously won the Super Bowl for the first time. So let's move on, because this could have been the path the Cowboys went on. A deal with Dak that gave him $31 million a year in 2019 on a 4-year extension. All right. That would have been awesome. All right. So to be clear here, the extension from a timeline standpoint in our hypothetical world, 2016, 17, 18, and 19 would have been the years on Dak Prescott's rookie contract. The extension is a 4-year deal on top of that. So now we're talking 2020, 2021, 2022. And that would have meant that last year, 2023, and not this year, would have been Dak Prescott's contract year. So all the conversations that we're having now, we could have potentially been having, obviously, a year ago entering 2023. So let's take a look at where Joel kind of sees this overall thing breaking down. A second Prescott extension. A 4-year extension in 2019 would have made 23 Prescott's contract year. And think about this. Joel writes this. Prescott was coming off of a down year by his standards. He uncharacteristically led the NFL with a career high 15 interceptions in 2022, despite missing 5 games early in the season with a fractured right thumb. Now, we're dealing in hypotheticals, so this is dangerous, and I don't think it's fair to say this hypothetical is fair and this hypothetical isn't fair, and I like this hypothetical and I don't like this hypothetical. So I don't want to do that. But if we assume, which is a very big and dangerous thing, but if we assume that everything would have gone the exact same, it's just the contracts that would have been different, right? If the Cowboys had been proactive, if everything on the field had gone exactly the same, if the Cowboys had still traded Amari and, everything had just happened the exact same way that it did, imagine negotiating with Dak a year ago. All right. And especially if you're somebody who doesn't believe in Dak. All right. Because today, in our real moment, the conversation is, well, he finished second in MVP voting. Well, he was awesome last year. Well, he did all these things. I mean, his resume from last season is impeccable. There's nobody that can deny that with a straight face, even if you're not a Dak Prescott supporter. Versus, imagine negotiating with him a year ago, coming off of all the interceptions, right? Coming off of what Jalen Hurts did. You could very easily and unequivocally say, Dak, dude, you had a really down year. Look at what Jalen Hurts did, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the negotiation, we've talked so much about leverage. It would have been maybe not all the way in the Cowboys' favor, but it would have been much closer to a 50-50 split relative to where we're at right now. And some of that is just the danger of, signing guys and not signing guys, because the Cowboys, like everybody else, have signed guys and then seen them, play poorly after, or whatever the case may be. But the leverage, so to speak, would have been a much different kind of, slicing of the pie a year ago in this hypothetical world than it is right now in our current world. So, it's just kind of a funny twist of this whole thing, but let's keep going here. And the Cowboys obviously were second in the NFC East. They did win the playoff game, but the 10-year, $450 million extension with whatever that Patrick Mahomes signed with the Chiefs in 2020 served as a ceiling, blah, blah, blah. Let's keep going here. He talks about Kyler Murray, et cetera, et cetera. Talks about Russell Wilson. This is with the Broncos and everything like that. The emerging trend of quarterbacks giving up 5 new years with extensions, Murray and Wilson would have given the Cowboys more ammunition to get the same length, because that happened with Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson. So on top of the fact that Dak, thank you, Bear, was coming off of a down year himself, there was then precedent across the NFL for the Cowboys to get the length of contract that they seek. Bear, we're going to be very cool here. Let's see. The mail truck is passing, and I promise we're going to make it because we're 15 minutes into this video. I apologize, but the mail truck passed. Thank you. The mail truck is a threat to our household, and Bear's being a very good boy defending us properly. We were 15 minutes into this video, so we're gonna go ahead and leave that in because that's how the sausage gets made around here. But anyway, this would have given the Cowboys some precedent relative to the market to work for them. The Cowboys wouldn't have been contending with trying to negotiate Prescott's deal after Hurts and Lamar Jackson both eclipsed Rodgers' blah 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 blah. There are 180 million, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The ink was barely dry on Hurts' contract before Jackson and the Ravens agreed to a 5-year deal, blah, blah, blah. This is the last part I want to get to because the mail truck's going to be wrapping its way back around here. Final thoughts. Let me make sure I'm on the screen because I'm on a different tab. Here we go. The Cowboys missed the opportunity to sign Prescott for nearly $10 million per year cheaper 2 years earlier with their actual approach to contract extensions. Prescott could have been signed to a third contract, most likely through the 2028 season, with Dallas continually being proactive. And this would have involved giving Dak Prescott $50 million a year last year in this hypothetical world again. And that would be a good value given how the quarterback market has continued to develop and the type of season he had in 2023. Imagine if the Cowboys had gotten a deal done with Dak Prescott a year ago. And we talked about, obviously, if they'd gotten it done on the heels of his down year in 2022, they would look like geniuses right now. They would look brilliant for getting it done and then Dak turning in the season that he did, as opposed to waiting. What they did, and they lost here, to be very clear here, the Cowboys challenged Dak Prescott. They dared him the way they did in 2019 and 2020. They dared him to go out and make money. And he did. I mean, and they're doing it again. They're on the verge of doing it again, at least. And that's what's so frustrating about this overall phenomenon, is that they don't seem to be learning from their mistakes, not just with the same player, but relative to everyone involved. Because they could have gotten a Prescott extension done last year, even after waiting in 2020 and 21, fine. They could have done it last year. They didn't. Fine. They could have gotten a deal done with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb was first eligible for a contract extension a year ago. They didn't. They let it play out. They didn't quite dare him the same way because it wasn't a contract or anything like that, but they did. They let things be up to chance. And what happened? CeeDee Lamb turned in literally the most impressive, the most robust, the most objectively great statistical individual season that any wide receiver has ever had in franchise history. Why would he show up? I mean, it's crazy. And they're on the verge of doing it again with Micah Parsons. And that's what frustrates me. Any report that we see right now is, the Cowboys are going to prioritize CeeDee Lamb. That makes sense, right? Because the wide receiver market is on the verge of blowing up. We've talked about that. I've done videos about that. I've written articles about that. They have to take care of Dak Prescott if they want him around because he's the quarterback of their team. So it stands to reason, logically, they have the most time left with Micah Parsons. Yeah, he's third on the list in terms of priority, whatever. He shouldn't be, because what if the same thing happens? What if Micah does what CeeDee did last year? What if Micah goes out? What if this is the year that Micah Parsons wins Defensive Player of the Year? So all of a sudden, next year, you're not negotiating with a player who has 2 years left on their contract, who's coming off of a down overall team performance relative to how the Cowboys played in the playoffs. Now, in this extra hypothetical world that we're crafting and weaving here, you're negotiating with the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, who's set to enter the final year of his contract, who's been nothing at that point in time but like an all-pro and Pro Bowler every single year of his career. You're leaving that to chance. And a lot of people will say things like, what if he has a down year like Dak did in 2022? Then you get him for even cheaper on the dollar. And my rebuttal to that is like, who wants that? Why would we want that? The things we all want, right? The Cowboys playing well and these players playing well mean that they would be more expensive. Are the Cowboys gonna, if Micah Parsons has a down year, be like, yes, you can get him for cheaper now because he's not as good? What? Like, who wants that? Who's thinking that way logically out loud? Nobody is. So if the Cowboys get a deal done with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons, obviously that is nirvana, and I will celebrate. And I will be happy if they get CeeDee or Dak or one of any of these three, whatever. But I will still remain frustrated if they wait and drag their feet with Micah, because they did not learn that lesson with Dak Prescott several times individually with just that one player, as we've looked at throughout the course of this discussion here. They have not applied the lesson that they should have learned to CeeDee Lamb, and they're on the verge. And this all goes back to DeMarcus Lawrence too, by the way. And they have not applied that level of, learning to Micah Parsons in the situation they find themselves in with him. It's crazy. Make sure to subscribe here to the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel, where you can watch all of the videos that I do and see everything that I do and all of our live shows and all those fun different sorts of things. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads if you'd like to do so at RJ Ochoa, or on TikTok at rj.ochoa. If you want to send me an email, you can do so, rj.ochoa at sbnation.com, or you can leave a comment down below, and I'll do my very best to get to those. Also, all that is true because my name is RJ Ochoa. His name is Bear Ochoa. He is my dog, and I love him very, very, very much. And every now and then he makes an appearance in one of our videos because he's narcissistic and he's pumped because the Bears are the subject of Hard Knocks. He loves the Cowboys, don't get me wrong, but he has a little bit of an allegiance to Chicago for obvious reasons. So he's very, very happy. He's feeling himself because the Bears are looking like a good team once again here in 2024. Let's go ahead and get out of here. I hope you've had a great weekend. I hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and I cannot wait to see you this coming week. Now that it is officially the month of June, will the Stars reach the Stanley Cup final and force me to make another video about how DFW teams are lapping the Dallas Cowboys? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But for now, I'm going to bid you adieu, and I'm going to hope that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful time. And yeah, thanks a lot, Bear. With all that being said, we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out.